So, good morning or afternoon, depending on what time you're watching this. This is Matt Giggs from The Side Hustle, and I'm absolutely delighted and overjoyed, really, to have twisted this lady's arm to be on my podcast today. This is Angie McQuillin, and Angie, you are a confidence coach, really, in terms of like your title. Thanks for joining us today, and yeah. I'm going to do a very quick introduction, if that's okay, with regards to what the vision is for The Side Hustle. I want to do that on every interview, and then we'll kind of kick off, if that's okay.
Okay, cool.
So I want basically to get personal development to the top of the UK's curriculum in schools. That is my sole ambition, and the only way I'm going to do it is with people like yourself. So how about that for a start, Angie?
No pressure.
No pressure. So it's all down to you, basically, if that's all right, and we'll go from there. But no, seriously though, you know, one of the things that my life changed the moment I decided to change the way I looked at life. So that was very much going back in the days, sort of 20, 30 years, when I decided to work on myself. Now, personal development can be quite a big subject, or an interesting subject for a lot of people. And certainly can create a lot of fear. But I brought you on here because of I expect a lot of the people that you work with, Angie, if I'm being honest, are people that a lot of people might not associate with lacking in confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
So who do you work with? Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Well, I work with a range of people. So I work mostly on my one-to-ones with leaders or business owners. I also run a leadership group, which is pretty much anybody from a senior management to director to C-suite, or again, business owner. And then I also run a boot camp, which is open to all. So they don't have to be, well, nobody has to be, but fundamentally that's mostly full of people that aren't in the leadership roles. And it could be anybody from entry level for their career, or people that are working into management, or even there is a number of people in there that do have team leadership responsibility, should we say, or management responsibility. But yeah, like you said, although I work with a range of levels, but fundamentally mostly leaders, the things that become people's sticking points are universal, regardless of people's title or who they are or whatever. So that's the main theme that comes up. But like you said, most people don't actually associate the things that I help people with as a confidence thing. And to be fair, if anybody came to me with such bad confidence that they could barely look me in the eye, or, you know, they weren't able to barely speak to me or something, I wouldn't take them on as a client. They wouldn't be a suitable client. So generally I work with people that are already very confident, but they've just kind of got some foggy patches of some areas of how they're managing their lives and the way that they're seeing it or thinking about it, or their beliefs about it, or how they're approaching it, which is causing them to hold back, or, you know, having the dreaded imposter syndrome creep in, or self-doubt, or any of those things.
I mean, look, we've spent hours and hours working together and talking about different subjects, but why do you think personal development should be at the top of our curriculum?
That's such a broad question.
It is broad.
Yeah. I mean, wow. I mean, how long have you got? I could be about 10 years answering that question.
Give me a couple of reasons why.
I think fundamentally is because when we start knowing ourselves better, we can lead a better life. It's really interesting because everybody that I work with, I always do like some, you know, what's the main changes that you've had from this? And always the changes that people have had weren't what they expected from working with me. Yeah. So most people come in saying, well, I just want to be more assertive, or I want to be, you know, I don't know, deal with conflict better, or I just want to be a better leader. But actually, when you start fixing those problems, other things start happening. You have a more fulfilled life. You have a more connected life with other people. So you feel more emotions in the process. And it sounds really cliche and also possibly a bit cheesy, but the reality is when people start feeling more alive, their life is just so much more fun. It's so much more engaged with the people. It's so much more like fulfilling, should we say. And not many people expect those those outcomes from working with me. They tend to just come in with a specific thing. I want to be more assertive so I can get promoted. When actually, yes, that often is a side effect, but it isn't the thing that I specialize in, or the thing that really excites me. The thing that excites me is when people go, I feel like my entire life is exciting, what I'm looking forward to now, as opposed to something that used to be quite mundane or a bit boring or a bit stressed or firefighty, or they wake up in the morning and dread going to work. Like often people have take up new hobbies, they connect with their partners better, they have deeper relationships with the children. The friendships groups sometimes change because how they're viewing the world changes as well. And they just feel so much more alive and like the future is bright. So if we can instill that into everybody, then the whole world would just be looking a lot brighter rather than quite doomy and gloomy, which is, I don't know, there's a lot of people out there that struggle with the same things. And when they beat those things, it's a game changer. The whole life changes.
Do you know what? I was with a young lad today, he's 17, completely lost. His family a bit worried about him. And just had him chatting to me for about an hour. They were really worried that he wasn't going to say anything. Actually, I think probably what helped him was talking to somebody completely different who doesn't know him, if that makes sense. You know, what was really interesting was that he had people that he was inspired by. He's done things that have inspired himself. He's just stopped listening to those people and stopped doing those things. And sometimes personal development can mean different things to different people. But actually, the essence of it for me, and one of the reasons why I'm on this mission, and I was at a school yesterday with 3 or 4 teachers chatting about the outcome for schools should be that kids leave there with self-confidence, self-belief, and a real feeling of clarity about what they're really great at and their strengths. I mean, that has to be the education system, but what percentage leave there feeling like that, as opposed to leaving school feeling like they're absolute failures? It's a scary world that we live in. But I want to take you back to your school days. I mean, obviously only a few years ago now, Angie, but
yeah, a couple of years.
Where did you go to school? What was your experience at school?
So just as a disclaimer, if you see me looking away from the screen, I'm just writing some notes of things that I want to include, but I don't want to interrupt you if you say something that triggers a memory. So okay, school days, blimey, that's a long time ago. I went to school in this tiny little town. So it wasn't like a big school or anything. It was big for the size of the town, but I was raised in a very small town with, I don't even know what the population is, but 10,000 or something, which is quite small compared to where I live now. It's a very interesting time at school. I basically had 2 friends that I was inseparable from. One of which, both of them were my best friends at the time. One of which in particular is still my best friend. And we've literally grown up together. And I do often, and we actually, when we hang out together now, we still often look back and go, can you imagine how awful school would have been if we didn't have each other? Like, just to hang out with. He was in the same class as me, he was in the same sets as me, he was in the same form as me. And it made a big difference having that friendship group that was like really close, which is only 1 or 2 people. I was obviously part of bigger groups of girls and stuff, but I was basically at the bottom of the rung. In school, it's so pressured with this hierarchy of importance or status and all the rest of it. And I was absolutely at the bottom of that pyramid. I was definitely not one for the boys. I was the one running around on the football pitch doing sliding tackles with all the boys, and all the girls were on the side like clapping, and I'm there with all the boys. So I wasn't like I certainly wasn't a guy's dream at the time, like Tomboy Angie. But at the same time, and I'm not saying I'm now either, just to be clear, but it definitely was a tougher world back then. But at school, I was diagnosed with being dyslexic after I left school. I was about 16, and I'd always known I'd struggle with that. It remained undiagnosed. I'd found my own coping strategies for it. And often people think, well, you can't read and write, and that isn't it at all. It comes up in different ways. For me, it comes up in my organization, comes up with my short-term memory, my structure. If I'm writing an assignment, it all gets jumbled up, which is really infuriating because I have all the content there, but I just seem to struggle to put it into this good flow of order kind of thing. On the whole, it's not that I didn't like school, but I did. I came across bullying a few times, like just people that just for whatever reason didn't like me for, God knows what kids' reasons are these days. So it wasn't all a bed of roses. And I think the thing that got me through it without going absolutely crazy was the fact that I had these 2 guys that I was basically inseparable from at the time. And I've grown up with them, and I'm still very friendly with both of them. And one of them I see every month, and we speak at least once a week kind of thing. So that saved me. But school I found quite difficult in many other ways, like the educational system, the way they expect you to learn. It feels like a memory test rather than true education. I learned a lot more from leaving school, going to university, but that was the experience of living on my own and leaving home, as opposed to actually getting the education that I got from uni. And then I learned more from going traveling around Canada than I probably learned in the 21 years beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, don't you feel like life, you learn more? Well, it's funny, really, like personal development and self-education, really, I didn't even know that it existed while I was at school. Because you're on a conveyor belt, aren't you? You go, you're told what to do, when to do it. This is it. This is what you need to learn. This is the exam. This is what you're going to get marked on. And, you know, I flunked the exams. I didn't revise. I didn't put enough effort in. And honestly, you feel like a bit of a failure. But anyway, coming up away from that, you know, one you just said there, one of the things that you just mentioned is when you went traveling. Why was traveling one of your greatest like life lessons and learning?
Because you get to see the world outside your tiny bubble, and you get to experience different cultures. You get to meet loads of interesting people. You're forced to be quick thinking and independent. You know, I went to Canada on my own, age 21, with one night's accommodation booked, and that was it. And then I arrived at 3:00 in the afternoon, checked into a little, I can't remember, like the hostel at the time, I think. And after that, I was technically homeless until I found somewhere else to stay, kind of thing. And they were fully booked up. So, but then you've got to find a way to travel around. You've got to be independent with even like the logistics of moving from one place to the next. When you get there, navigating your way around unfamiliar areas. My sense of direction is absolutely terrible, by the way. So how I got around without Google Maps, I do not know. But yeah, just basically it's a sink or swim environment. Like you land there, you're in a completely unfamiliar area, unfamiliar people, in a completely different country and climate. And all of a sudden you've got to survive, you've got to do well. So learning those types of skills was way more beneficial for me than, you know, learning about, you know, I don't know, long division or something that I can now just simply use a calculator for. It's interesting because I actually had a podcast interview yesterday with two teachers who were interested in very similar kind of questions and topic. And one of the things I said to them, which I'll say again today, was when I was at school, when it came back to like the reports that you'd get from the end of every year from your teachers in every class, I always had a very common theme that was arising from one class to the next, which was that I was well behaved in class generally. I was a pleasure to be around, whatever, all the good stuff. I was quite extrovert. But always the feedback was I spent too much time talking to Matty, or too much time talking to Matthew, or whatever. That's my best mate that I'm still best mates with now. But the irony of it is I was shamed for that, and I was reprimanded for it. And I was basically told I needed to be quieter and I needed to listen more. And actually not one person had it in their, you know, even occurred to them to come up to me and say, Angie, you talk a lot. And actually when you do talk, you've got some, you know, some level of articulation. Maybe you should consider a career when you spend all your time talking. So here I am now as a coach. I spend all my time talking to my clients. I'm up on stage doing public speaking. I run workshops where I'm talking. I can see things in a different way and explain it by the use of my talking. And even before I even became a coach in the corporate world, I was given the role to do business development, basically. And as an account manager, and I'd go to these big on-site events and mingle with all the clients there. And I'd build these businesses massively from a small amount of revenue to a high amount of revenue, purely because I could go in there and talk to people. So this skill that I actually had, which was my forte, was the thing that they tried to crush and squash as the thing. Nobody actually encouraged me to use my voice, which is now what I'm doing. It took me 37 years or whatever, 36 years to actually go out and do my own thing about it. Yeah. But what a difference it's made that I'm actually embracing the thing that school actually tried to shame me for.
And this is my point. This is the whole reason why I believe in this concept, this vision. Is it's taken you a long time, and me a long time, to figure out what our strengths are, what are our values, where should we be operating in terms of how we feel and think, and what that actually then brings in terms of happiness and joy into your life, and actually the impact you have on other people, right? So, you know,
yeah, sure.
Why you're on here is because you've made an impact for me personally, but that's not for this particular podcast. But I honestly believe that this is the stuff that you're born with. There's an element where you've got these intrinsic gifts, the reason why you're on this planet. And that's our education system is about bringing those things to fruition. And talking about that, what was your biggest challenge at school, if you don't mind me asking? Because some kids will probably be watching this, and you mentioned bullying, a little bit of an experience around bullying. I don't want to go into it massively, but you know, there was obviously some experience there that was negative at school. How did you handle that?
with great difficulty, because I didn't know any different when I was that age. Nobody had ever kind of introduced me to the stuff that I've been introduced to since, that I'm now able to manage things that used to floor me when I was younger. So, I mean, I didn't really enjoy, I kind of got through the subjects. Like, I wasn't in top grade for everything. I wasn't like Miss Brain Box. I got good grades, I got straight A's and B's, but I had to work my arse off. It didn't come naturally to me to follow the educational system. I was very fortunate that I had very brainy parents who did a lot of so not homeschooling as such, but like they helped me with a lot of homework at home and taught me stuff that got me through my GCSEs and future college and university and stuff, which helped me. But at school, it wasn't easy the way that they taught. But I think the biggest thing that was the most difficult thing was just the need to fit in. This overwhelming pressure of being liked, this overwhelming pressure of feeling connected to a group of people, not feeling that you're, ostracized, or you don't really have people to turn to. Those embarrassing moments when, there's parties and you're the only one not invited, or I don't know, if there's an argument and everybody sides with the other person, and all of a sudden you're, I don't know, just kind of removed from the group a little bit as punishment. And I think it must be worse these days, because when I was younger, the likes of things like social media didn't even exist, like Facebook and Instagram. And I also have a theory about those things, that it fuels the way that we kind of view the world, which contributes to me being employed and running my business okay. But similarly, the way that we're detached from who we are ourselves, because it's all about external validation. And I think that starts from a very young age. So it must be even worse now, because, people use Facebook as a weapon. I'm removing you from my friend on Facebook because we've fallen out, and I'm not going to engage in your likes, or somebody makes a post about somebody else, like cyberbullying. So I can't even imagine how it would have been if you took me back there now, and I was like, I don't know, 12 years old again, and having to live in the world that I lived in then, but now with the likes of social media around, it would have been horrendous. But to answer your question, with my experience personally, when those things didn't exist, I'd just say it was just the overwhelming urge to fit in and to be liked, and all of that stuff is driven from the way that society is run. I don't think and feel in that way anymore. If people don't like me, I'm completely accepting of it. And the more I am just myself and more authentic and live by my values, the more people naturally gravitate to me. And I have such deep relationships with those people and really connect with people, but other people I'm quite repelling for. So you might, I don't know, I wouldn't say I was like Marmite, but some people actually feel a bit almost overwhelmed with my level of vulnerability that I'm open to share, and the fact that I'm not going to change who I am in order to appease other people or to get other people's approval. But that it isn't that easy when you're 12 years old and you're living in a world that everybody's thinking and feeling the same thing. So for me, that was the most difficult thing. I just didn't really feel like I fit in, apart from the two boys that I spent my inseparable time with as a little group of three.
What would you say now? This is why I think there's a synergy. We feel very similar in these the ways we felt at school to the way we feel now, and the freedom that you feel now in comparison to the trapped feeling of when you were at school. If you went back to your 12-year-old self, what would you be telling yourself? If you could go back and give that 12-year-old Angie going through those challenges of wanting to fit in, what advice would you give yourself? Or what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference of advice and reassurance, right? So the first place I would go to is reassurance that you're going to be fine. Like, everything's going to work out. All the things that I think made me a little bit different, just with the way that I thought about the world, the way that I tend to think generally, like, maybe that's because I'm dyslexic, my brain is wired differently, or it's just what I was born with, or whatever. Like, there's so many different reasons why, who knows? But that kind of went against me at such a young age. And the first place I'd go to is reassurance that you're going to be fine. Like, you're not going to end up this lonely, friendless, big fatty with a crap job. Like, that isn't actually anything like how it's turned out. Like, I love what I do. I've looked after myself. I've got amazing friends. I'm very grateful for the things that I've got a lovely home and beautiful dog and all these lovely things in my life. So yes, that first place would be reassurance, and even tell the 12-year-old self that you're going to have an amazing dog when you're older. That would have probably given me a lift, because I've always been a fanatic about dogs, like obsessed with them.
I know you are. I know you are quite. Honestly, the pair of you are very silly. You need to get together.
But in terms of advice, so it's just the advice piece, I think it'd be very hard to give just quick advice, and it always is when even now in my line of work, people say to me, oh, I lack confidence, what should I do? As if I'm just going to be able to give this one liner.
Yeah.
And if it was that easy, everybody would do it and nobody would have any confidence issues, right? So the advice I would probably give is like, stay true to who you are. Like, you might be a bit different, but the people that like you are going to really, really like you. And it's okay for people to not like you, but it's so easy to say that in a one-liner, but it doesn't always resonate until you've dug deep into what it looks like, and this, the behaviors that are attached to that, and the belief systems that are attached to that. But if I was literally only had like 1 minute with myself, that would be what I would say.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I mean, is that part of some of the lessons that you've learned in life, would you say?
In what way? Sorry.
Well, from probably thinking at school, which a lot of people do, if there are school kids, teenagers watching this, wanting to fit in is something that you're conditioned to believe. Whilst now, I couldn't give a crap whether I fit in now. And I know you don't. And that's because you're staying true to who you are, and you're living your authentic self, which is, in itself is a mission. But was that one of the lessons from your life so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was a game changer. And coaching had a great deal to do with that. Working with, I'm not secret about my story. It's all over my website, whatever, but I got into I've been into self-development from about the age of 14. My mum's a therapist. It's kind of embedded into my childhood to a degree, and I've always been fascinated by it. I got into psychotherapy, as in being as a client, when I was about 20. So I was quite young to put myself into that, but I just knew something was off. I just thought, I don't like how I feel. On paper, I've got a lot of things going for me, but I just don't feel good. And I didn't really kind of connect all the dots. I was a bit too young to really put it into like understanding of myself. I understood a lot about psychology and behavior and stuff, but I couldn't kind of relate it to myself. And then I stayed in, not constantly, but in and out of therapy for about 12 years until I got to my very early 30s, like 31, 32 kind of age. And then by an absolute coincidence, I stumbled into a coach, and I'd never even heard of coaching. I was like, that's a badminton coach. It's a football coach. What do you mean by coach?
And then it's associated to sports, isn't it? For a lot of people, coaching
exactly.
is a sports thing,
Yeah, exactly. It's pure. I'd never heard of anything other than it being a sports kind of related thing. Yeah. And then I ended up working with this guy for about 4 or 5 months, and I had more benefit personally from those 4 or 5 months than I'd had in 12 years of the previous strategy. And all of a sudden, everything just looked different. It was almost like, when you walk indoors and you've been sunny outside and you've worn your shades and you forget that you're wearing them, and you're walking around the house, still got your shades on. And it's like all of a sudden somebody just taking my shades off, and I'm like, oh my God, everything looks so much brighter. I understand it better. I can see it now. And then it was amazing, because at the time when I came out of coaching, I was like, oh my God, I'm healed and everything's amazing. But even now I look back, and that was about a decade ago, and I've changed so much since then. This stuff never stops. And that's what I love about self-development. It never, ever, there's no finish line. No. I'm not racing towards anything. I'm never going to get to a stage where I'm like, I'm done. But I could stop and go, I'm done. But because I know that I always want to do new things, I'm an adrenaline junkie, I want to, grow my business, I've got all these ambitions, I have to change myself in order to achieve those things and do those things. And as a result, it's the self-development in that process that has been huge. And it's just been an absolute game changer. I just see things differently to other people. And what's the most interesting thing is for me to stop talking in a sec. Like the most interesting thing is that I've still got some old friends from the old me. And some of my friends I've stayed close to because we've kind of grown together and we've been on a journey together. Yeah. But some of my old friends, they're the same people as they used to be, but they're also very similar to who I used to be. So the things that glued us together as a friendship is now no longer existing. So I've got friends that used to be very much, and I admit I used to be like this, and it's almost embarrassing and cringe-worthy for me to say, but I used to be driven by how much money I was earning or what my title was and how well I was doing compared to other people and all that self-comparison piece. And it's just not how I see the world anymore. Like literally it repels me. And when I'm in the close proximity of people that still talk in that way around how much they're earning and how great they are, and almost with a sense of entitlement or arrogance, and I literally want to throw up. Like it repels me that much. Sometimes I have to leave the room. So I'm like, I can't stand the fact that I used to be like that, but I'm not going to beat my old self up. Thank God I've changed. But those measurement systems of success and who we are so foreign to me now that I find it repelling to be close to. So a lot of my friendship groups have changed as well. And the people that I'm now closer to, that I've probably come into proximity with in the last 5 or 6 years, I'm closer to them than I ever was with the people beforehand, because the relationships are naturally deeper, because all that material stuff and that self-comparisons with the people and the measurement of success being material goods isn't part of my new friendship groups at all. And it's just purely based on who they are, how they think. Why I love them is because they're gentle, they're kind, they're empathic, they're like they said that already, but they're encouraging, they're not competitive, they're loving, like they're just lovely, lovely people. And it's just wonderful to spend time with such people rather than probably some of the old people I used to spend time with.
And it's okay to recognize that. So, you know, one of the things is, you know, I've kind of only recently got my head around is that how some people think that I repel doesn't make them bad people, right? It doesn't make them, you know, they're not working against me. It's just how they operate. It's how they feel. It's what they value. It's just different to what I value. And actually, that's all right. You know, there's nothing wrong with that distinction. You just made me think of the question that you first asked me when we first spoke. I'm not going to get the question across as well as you got it across to me that day. But it was something along the lines of, you take away your businesses. Can you just remind me of that question?
No, me, it's probably along the lines of take away your businesses, take away the fact that you're a father and a wife, sorry, and a husband. Who are you?
Yeah.
What's left?
Now, I talk a lot as well, so we're jointly aligned in that particular area, and it stumped me. It made me think for a second, what is left? You know, who am I? Because I certainly feel that sometimes I put my level of self-worth and I attached it to achievements. Even having a beautiful wife and a nice house and kids, and that was all part of the, you know, look at what I've achieved sort of thing. Not that I'm not braggy, I really try not to be anyway, but it, you know, that becomes part of this thing. And it can sometimes take you further away from who you really are.
Absolutely.
Great question for somebody who's probably watching this right now.
Yeah, who are you?
Who are you? And why did you ask that question?
Because it gives me an insight of how aware you are at that stage and how much work needs to happen. And to be fair, you are and you were then and you are now very self-aware. Like you're very open, and you grab things by the like the bull of the horns, and you'd like take it for wherever you want to take it. But it gives me an indication of where that person is, and it gives me an indication of it gives the other person the indication of where they are, because it's a question that they start thinking, do you know what, I've got all this stuff, but I don't even know who the hell I am. And they're talking about themselves. That's quite striking or alarming when somebody doesn't even know who they are when they remove their achievements.
And I think if you was to ask that question to a number of people that are achieving or achieving in their own mind, that would be something that maybe does help them to stand still for a minute and just think. There was a question that I heard on a podcast today, really simple one, but again, it's one that made me want to ask this to kids at 16 when they leave school. Are you happy? It's quite an emotional kind of charged question, because I know the answer for the majority already. And that's why we're doing this today. Because happiness has only really occurred to me. I've had my best year in 46 years. And this is 2 or 3 years after probably having one of my worst years. And I really feel happy. And it's not false happiness. It's not I want everyone to see how happy I am. It's not that at all. I couldn't. There's so many things that have gone on in the last 12 months that I haven't told people about that have made me joyous and feel really good about myself. And probably the reason why I don't share those things is because I don't want, it's that perception that kind of goes through your mind. But I think at 16, how many kids really understand what happiness is? And the difference between my feeling now and maybe even just like 18 months, 2 years ago, is that I'm living my life and I'm aligning my decisions to the things that I call true beliefs, the feelings that I have, what's important to me. I'm aligning decisions, relationships, friendships, partnerships to those things. And it's courageous, but it gives you freedom. And I think freedom gives you happiness. What do you think? Sorry to, I've just fired that.
It's interesting. I think you're absolutely right. I think, unfortunately, not a lot of people know what true happiness feels like. And I think that's also one of the problems, because if people don't know any different, how can they measure something that they haven't experienced? Yeah. So, and how can I put that? That's basically one of the points that when I speak to people at the end of a program, when I've worked with them, what are the main things that you've changed? They feel that the key thing is that they're just overall happier, but they didn't even know that was even an experience or a sensation that they could even have, because if you'd have asked that question, are you happy, a year ago, they'd have said, yeah, of course I'm happy. I've got this, I've got that, I've got a beautiful wife, got a beautiful husband, or whatever the case is. I've got all these things, got these like great car, great kids, but are you happy? Not many people, until you've had the experience of what that actually feels like, can answer it, because you don't know what you don't know, and you can't compare to something if you haven't experienced it. Until you've experienced it, that's when you know that that's the difference. And I think when you have the self-development, it really gives you that opportunity to start seeing parts of yourself that you didn't even know were even existent, you know.
And that's the bit that you've just hit the nail on the head for me. And that's the bit that when it got to like my mid-30s and I drove Mel's car for, no, this is probably actually my early 30s, 31, 32. Shortly after Mel and I got together, I was in a car driving it back from the pub the following morning. Obviously, you left it there the night before, very well behaved. And there was a CD in there with a guy called Tony Robbins.
Yeah, Tony. I've hugged Tony.
Yeah, have you hugged him? Yeah, I've had a good hug with him as well. He's a big guy.
It's like hugging a fridge.
Yeah, I know, it's huge. But and what was funny about that, and that introduced me to self-development, because I drove the car back, and my immediate reaction was, "Who's this jerk? This American? What does he know? You know, that kind of whoa, you know." But when he was talking, and I started to listen. 10 minutes, 15 minutes in, it was a long journey, about half an hour drive home. I thought, he's talking to me here. That's how good his content was, or is. And then I drove a longer distance home than I needed to, because I started to figure out that there's stuff in this that applies to me. And when you go through the process of personal development, you've just hit the nail on the head. You start to uncover parts of yourself that you didn't even know were there.
Right.
There's a feeling around that it's really hard to describe unless you've, like you say, you've found it or you've done it. And that's what I think everybody should feel. Yeah,
it's exciting, because you start seeing everything suddenly looks really exciting, and what you can do in the future, like your capabilities, what you believe that you're worth, you know, the things that you want to go for rather than hold yourself back from. And like, even before, when I was talking around, you know, the old friendship groups, that some of them now kind of repel me, those, not the people, but those conversations, let me make that very clear, those conversations around materialism and things actually repel me. But it's not coming from a place that I'm shaming those people, no. But it's so foreign to the things that I now connect with, and so far away from the things that are about who we are and what we do, and not be measured on what we achieve. Because, you know, if everything is based on comparison to other people or other people's external validation, that's the exact thing that drives the need to fit in. That's the exact thing that drives the feeling of losing yourself, because everything is based on, I need to be this other person in order for you to like me. So the message that the brain gets is that I am bad. Who I naturally am is bad, and I need to be somebody that I'm not in order for you to like me more, or to at least accept me. And that's why it's so damaging. And that's why I find those conversations repelling, because the underneath message behind it is that who I am isn't good enough. And that's what I hear. And it's just so foreign to where I think and feel now. And I just can't connect to that type of conversation. So often I have to even ignore it or walk away. But that's the reason why, because it's basically detaching from yourself. And I guarantee if you spoke to those people that have all those things as their measurement systems of being good enough, they would say that they are happy. But I'd guarantee if they would also be willing to put the guard down and work with me for a few months to a year, they would have a completely different outlook on life and a different view of what happiness actually looks like. Now, that isn't to say it's bad to have a lot of money and a massive car. That's great if you've got it. But if you're doing that as the way to say, this makes me, it's the conclusions you come to off the back of it. Is it, I've got this, but I'm still an awesome person? Then you're on a winning streak. But if you've got that and it's your measurement system as if I'm good enough, that's when it gets a bit toxic and very damaging for your self-worth and your self-confidence.
God, yeah. Yeah. I mean, how many relationships have the honeymoon period, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's me pretending or being someone to fit into this relationship, or I want that person to see me like this. And then it's like the Big Brother situation, the cameras, you forget the cameras on, you know, and people gradually end up falling into their true self. And that then doesn't fit the narrative of the relationship.
Of course.
But the world seems to be moving more into that direction where it's about what people want people to see about them,
painful,
rather than who am I really? Why is it important that I connect with that? I'm going to ask you that question. Why is it important that people should connect with that over and above the likes, the followers, and everything else?
Because you just lose a sense of who the hell you are. You don't even, if you spend your life conforming to what other people will like you more for, whether it's the clothes that you wear, the car that you drive, the job that you do, you're basically saying that who I am isn't good. I am bad. And once that happens on loop and you create that narrative, which is normally sits in your unconscious, and that goes on for weeks, months, years, decades, you end up with somebody that is just a shell of their former self. Like what they see is just this like empty vessel of somebody that is putting on a performance with a massive game face that on paper and on their, you know, acting world looks amazing, but actually underneath they're depressed, or they're upset, or they just feel bloody miserable, or, you know, that they're very reactive to different situations, or they're very easily flawed, because it makes you more dependent on that validation if that's your measurement system, if you're good enough. So if you ever receive any criticism or constructive criticism either, you're still going to be left in this place of vulnerability that you could be flawed from that and feel depressed from it and feel shaken by it and feel less good about yourself. Whereas actually when your measurement systems come from who you are, then all that other stuff stops being a measurement system. It just becomes something that happens, but you're not attached to it in the same way. You don't need it. Now, this isn't about, and just to make this point clear, because often people misunderstand this isn't about saying enjoying validation is bad. I'm not saying that. I bloody love it. I'm not going to deny that. I love getting compliments. I love being told that my clients had a great time working with me. I love all that stuff, but I don't need it. And there's a fundamental difference between enjoying it and needing it. Our DNA allows us to enjoy it. It's part of who we are, to connect with other people and to fit in. But I'm not going to compromise on who I am in order to do that, because that's when I'm going to crush my own self-confidence. So there's a difference of enjoying validation to needing it. And so if you submit a piece of work to your boss and they don't say that's brilliant and you're flawed by that, then you needed it. But if you don't care what they say, but then you get the validation, you enjoy it, that's completely different and perfectly fine.
And you know, thing is, you articulate things way better than I do. On this, I was like, God, how do you explain it? I'm not trying to blow smoke up your backside, but the other thing, my wife, she had a message from someone who split up with someone and they found somebody else, and the message was, yeah, this guy makes me really happy. And my first reaction is probably the same as your one, is there's a problem there, huge problem, because you don't necessarily need another person to make you happy. The first thing is you've got to be happy about who you are yourself. And a relationship's about adding to that, not absolutely having anyone subtract it or put it together and then there's the happiness. Does that make sense? It
does. And I think it comes down to what that person actually meant. It's just a sentence, isn't it? So it could have been meant as,
I know the context before, that's probably,
oh right, okay, sure. I mean, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling happy when you meet somebody. That's like, right. that would suggest potentially that person is adding value to your life, and therefore that is a worthwhile relationship. However, on the point that you're making, I do agree that a lot of the relationships that are existent these days are codependent. and the second person in the relationship is filling a gap that was missing in the first person. And if that's the case, then you're heading into very dangerous territory, because you're leading into like codependency and dependency on each other. And it's not about being detached emotionally from that person, but still knowing that although I'm attached to them, if this all falls apart, I know 100% I'm going to be okay. But when somebody's life completely falls apart and around them and completely crumbles because they've gone through a breakup, it's possibly a sign of a high level of codependence.
And that is kind of where, from the previous relationship, you can see where it's gone. But it's a point I wanted to add to the one that you just made before that. And there's a story, and a lot of coaches use that analogy about the plane and the oxygen mask.
Yep.
Can you just give us your rendition of that? Because I think if we're going to leave the people watching this on a point, this is kind of like the point of personal development.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously people say you've got to put your own oxygen mask on before you save your kids if you're sat next to them or anybody else, because obviously if you're in a plane and you can't breathe and you die, you can't save anything or anyone outside you. I use a slightly different analogy. I'm like, well, first and foremost, when you understand what your values are, you live by them. And first and foremost, they are what you offer yourself. So where people often get the complexity with this is they think, I'm not going to stand up to this person who's been rude to me because that wouldn't be kind to them. It might embarrass them in public, and I might disrupt the I don't know, the environment or something like that. Like the dynamic in this particular moment. But what we're not doing in that moment is being kind to ourselves. So I always coach my clients to, like, first and foremost, your values are what you offer yourself, and secondary to what you offer the people. Now, where the analogies I give is, for example, if my friend goes through, and I've told this story many a time, so stop me if I'm repeating myself. You've probably heard me say this, Matt. But if my friend goes through a divorce or, a breakup of some kind, or even a grievance, somebody dies or something, and they're really, really feeling bad about it, because I've done my own work, I can be with that person and I can go deep with them into the emotional entanglement that they're experiencing. And they're going to get benefit from doing that because I'm in a place that I can support them and hold that space safely. And we can go into the weeds of what that feels like for them and how that is for them. And they then benefit from that conversation. But if I wasn't able to go there because I haven't done my own work, I'm more likely to go, oh, forget it. Let's just go down the pub and get smashed, like just kind of drink it away or whatever. And it's the aversion to actually go there. So my friend then in that situation would benefit from it. In the same situation that, I'm trying to think of something else. Like if I
just really want to just focus on that, because there's courage there, a lot of courage. The reaction to most people passing away, and I'm having gone through that myself, it was, let's just go get pissed. And actually what I probably needed early on is that, let's talk about it. Let's go into that place and the value that brought, the value that can bring that person. So I just had to, that really resonated that.
Sure. And that's the difference of like having that reliability. It's the same as if you show up as who you are, even in the workspace or with your friends or whatever, people trust you more, because when I say yes to people, they know I mean yes, because they trust me that I would say no if I didn't or couldn't do it. So, but when we're living in a world when we're not being ourselves, we're more likely to agree to things that we don't want to do. We laugh at jokes we don't find funny. We say yes when we want to say no. And all these things keep coming up. So then people don't actually really know who you are. They can't connect with you because they're connecting with the version of you that they're seeing as opposed to the real you. So when you're very transparent, like this is who I am, like it or lump it, people then connect with that and they trust you more. They feel safer around you because they know that there's no games, there's no backstabbing, there's no passive aggression. Like you mean what you say and you do what you mean and all the rest of it. So this is why it's so much beneficial to other people if you can show up as that person on a day-to-day basis, because other people benefit from you being that person, not a version of yourself that they're fronted with.
But the world seems to be trying to pretend to be someone that they're not, to give that person what they need. But actually, it doesn't really work like that, does it?
It does not work like that. Basically, what you end up doing is a bunch of people that nobody really knows anybody.
No, but that feels like I can see it around me. I can see people trying to be a version of what that other person needs them to be, or what they think they need them to be. What the most important thing is, if you be yourself, you be your best self, you be your authentic self, you'll attract people around you that genuinely connect with you, you'll have those deeper conversations, those deeper relationships, and you will feel fulfillment and joy.
In a nutshell, yeah. And I used this example yesterday. So if you know, if you've watched both interviews, you might hear this as a bit of repetition, but the fundamental thing is that a lot of people don't necessarily understand what it means because they look at the surface level stuff, which is the behaviors. So actually values are on a much deeper level of who you are. So actually, if you put me in an environment where I'm with my best friends and we're all drinking wine and we're all getting a bit tiddly and giggling and laughing and jazz handy and animated and everything like that, I'm still going to live by my values, which would be honesty, responsibility, freedom, integrity, empathy, kindness, caring, loyalty, love. All those values would still be the same if I'm in that environment. But if you then transport me into an environment such as a funeral, you're not going to have the same behaviors. I'm not going to behave in the same way because it would be wrong for me to behave in the wrong way, or the same way in that environment. But my values haven't changed. I'm still going to be integral. I'm still going to be honest. I'm still going to be kind and empathic. And so the values don't change from one situation to the next, but the behaviors that sit upon those might change based on what environment those values kind of look like in terms of that behavior. So again, if I'm hanging out with my best friends, you know, probably not going to be a surprise to some, but it's not unusual for me to drop the odd F-bomb or whatever. But if my friend is then there with their 3-year-old daughter or son, I'm not going to do that because it would be wrong for me to swear in front of a child. And as a byproduct, the child would benefit from it as well. But that doesn't mean my values change. I'm still the same person. I'm still going to be honest, but my behavior might change a little bit based on the environment, but nothing changes on your values ever. And when I ask people what the values are, and they go, do you mean my values at work or my values at home? I'm like, okay, immediately there is a red flag. We need to talk about this immediately because your values will never change no matter what circumstance you're in.
Yeah, a lot of people say, oh, I'm different at home. You're like, oh, that's an interesting one. And
well, you are going to be different. You are going to be different to a degree. You're going to have different conversations. Like take yourself, you're going to have different conversations with Mel than you would do with a work colleague. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be dishonest with Mel and you're not going to be dishonest with your work colleague. So that's the value that might change. So sorry, that's the value that stays consistent, but the behavior might change. Now you're going to be integral with Mel. And you're going to be integral at work, but what those behaviors look like in the workplace will be different when you're sat in an environment where you're having like a date night with your wife or something. So it's still very.
It's what I like about that though, is like you say, it's the behavior and the environment.
Yeah, not the value. Yeah, and once you understand what your values are, the behaviors almost become second nature to who you need to be in that situation.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant way to. I think, unless you've got anything else you'd like to add on the subject of personal development, I think that's a really great way to end.
Well, I think the only thing I'd like to add really, since this is, you know, connected to like the schooling system and everything like that, if you are watching this and you're either just left school or you're kind of at that age when you're in school, or even if you're a parent watching this as an adult and you've got kids in school, I agree with what you said earlier, Matt, that we all were born with some special skills. Some people are incredibly gifted at languages. Other people are incredibly gifted at music. Other people are incredibly good artists. Other people, I've got a very different brain when it comes to psychology and reading situations in a different way. And we've all got our own special skills, which is not often what is recognized from the standard educational system. And there is a lot of opportunity for people out there in the big bad world after they finish school to utilize those skills in a way that you could make a very, very happy career out of, rather than just being conditioned into this memory test, which is what you basically sit when you do GCSEs and A-levels and degree. And then you have to follow this standard path of, I have to be one of the recognized titles, like a doctor, a dentist, an MD, a CEO, whatever. There are so many other things that you can do and earn a very lucrative income if that is of interest to you, but utilizing skills that are natural to you, not just this streamlined, you go here, you go there, you go here, and then you get this job and then you live happily ever after. It's just so much more opportunity out there than what people might realize, but don't belittle or undermine or neglect the skills that you might naturally have, even if they're completely outside the standard educational system.
Oh man, honestly, that's again well articulated, but the point behind that is so true. You know, if you're in your authentic self, you're using your skill set, you're using the things that you're passionate about, and you're getting paid for it, that's,
Mm.
I think you've succeeded in your career.
Mm-hmm.
That's success for me. And you know, you think about the amount of hours people do work in unhappy environments, unhappy roles, and what the ramifications of that for the people around them. That's why it's essential that we start to make these changes at the top,
Mm.
to help people to facilitate their strengths into their careers.
I heard a quote from, well, I actually saw a small clip from Jordan Peterson. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he was doing a talk at university to university students at the time. And he said there's probably 200 people in this hall right now, but only about 5% of you will actually have a career. He said the rest of you will have a job. And that's the difference. A career is something that you're moving forward in, something that you love doing, you're passionate about, you're helping other people, and you're making an income that you can comfortably live off. Doesn't matter what that figure is, it's just as long as you can live comfortably. Similarly, most people are so indoctrinated by the system that they go and get a job that they don't necessarily get any excitement from, they don't necessarily want to do day to day for the rest of their lives, but they do it for the income, and then build a belief that they feel trapped. Or I can't change it now. I've climbed my way too high into this corporate ladder, and I've got 2 kids and I've got a partner, and I can't put those people at risk, so I have to stick it out. And so many people spend their entire, you talk about 40 years of your bloody life. Like, this is so important to recognize where your passions are and what you really get excited about, because if you spend 40 years of your life 5 days a week, most weeks, with anything from 8 to 50 days for some people, doing something you don't enjoy doing, you're just going to be feeling miserable. But if you're doing that work and you're excited about it and you bounce out of bed and you look forward to turning up in the office, it's almost like you can barely believe you get paid to do it sometimes.
100%. Angie, thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest. I'm sure there's going to be a part 2 and maybe a part 3 if I'm cheeky in the new year. But thanks again for your
Which basically means yes, knowing you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
No worries. Good to see you.